mine is still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind that's still time, build and refine. Still getting mine in the 9 Geometrix 9
Sean J
9
Stylus Chris
9
DJ as one
9
DJ as one chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still it's an ill It's an ill mind is still time build and refine. Still getting
All
mine
right,
in
what
the
up,
nine.
DJ Geometrix here. We're back at it again. That time, Thursday Night Live. Episode 9.
Geometrix.
Shout out to everyone watching us
Sean
right
J.
now on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram,
Stylus Chris.
DJ
AS1.
That link on your screen, bit.ly/the9@9. Once again,
DJ AS1 chops it with precision.
It's an ill mind that's still. It's an ill.
We'll talk about artists and DJs that are using their platform.
It's an ill mind that's still time build and refine. Still getting mine in the nine.
As always, I'm
Geometrix.
Sean J.
Stylus Chris. DJ AS1.
Build and refine. Still getting mine in the nine. Geometrics.
Sean J.
Stylus Chris.
DJ AS1.
Yeah. Once again, we're back. We're back with the 9@9, the only show on the internet where we have 9 DJs on a roundtable panel discussing today's DJ topics. This show is presented to you by Beat Refinery DJ School at Bach to Rock. If you want to learn how to mix, scratch, and make music, visit us at beatrefinery.com with locations nationwide. Make sure to subscribe to the 9@9 podcast on Apple, Spotify, Mixcloud, wherever you consume and listen to all things podcasts. New episodes uploaded every Monday. So on with the show. Let me introduce the rest of the crew. We got DJ AS1.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Next up, we have Sean J.
Yeah. What's up?
And finally, I'm going to pass it off to the one and only Stylus Chris.
Let's start it like this, son.
Peace. Yeah, we are really thankful to have these guests here today. If you've been following through with 10 weeks of these episodes, we've been able to really dive into some fun topics, some serious topics, some real life topics, some nerdy topics. But this week in particular, we're diving into something that's near and dear to pretty much everybody on this panel's heart. But I think we're seeing some pretty interesting times in our country, and we're seeing some, I think, hopefully some real change. And we've got some of the people that I inspire me on a daily basis for what they do, not only professionally but also in their humanitarian efforts. So with that, we're going to run them down as we always do in alphabetical order. Our girl Alchemist, Beat Refinery teacher, alum, instructor. Fun fact about Kim, because she's so humble, she's also spent a lot of time in the Brooklyn Symphony as a violist. So she is super dope when it comes to music. But she actually was an activist long before she was a musician or DJ, and has been a troublemaker to the system ever since she was a kid.
My favorite troublemaker.
She has protested police brutality and corruption for 20 years. She has been arrested by the Secret Service for protesting. She believes that actions speak louder than Instagram posts, and that standing up, even if you're the only one standing up, is fundamental to true change and revolt. That is DJ Alchemist.
Hey.
Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. I also wanted to point out that June is a really great month for activists, because June 11th we had a day to recognize and advocate for and free political prisoners, and then tomorrow is Juneteenth. So this is kind of a perfectly timed podcast.
Well, this was, full disclosure, this was Kim's idea. So
Yes.
Thank you, Kim.
The reason we are all here.
That's right. Kim is special to me personally, and also to the Beat Refinery. And
Absolutely.
you know, when Kim, it's hard to get Kim on TV like this. So she really wants to be here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, he's been on our show once before, and we were super grateful to him. He was touring DJ for Wiz Khalifa, assistant program director at Middays on Go 95.3. He's in the heavy hitters. He's a 2-time Red Bull 3-style winner. He has been just right in the thick of it and we're so thankful for him to be here. Philly, Pittsburgh, LA, Portland, now in Minnesota. Let's give it up for DJ BONICS.
BONICS, yeah.
Thank you guys. All you guys have beautiful smiles. It's real good. Thanks for having me, man. Just to come back on the show and all the kind words that you've said already, and just to even be a part of this group and whatever I'm doing that's emanating social change, and you're receiving it that way, I can't be any more happier than that. So, you know, I'm sure we might butt heads if we do in this conversation. If we don't, I still like everyone, and you know, it's all
like you too.
We love you.
Well, you know, I think you know, I've been obviously talking with you and following you, and I think we all have to always remind ourselves that if we only look to hang out with people that think exactly the way we do, we're going to be very lonely people. And, you know, we always have to realize that sometimes we might differ on things, but even if it's your favorite team or your favorite animal, you know, whatever it is, some like dogs, some like cats, it's the way it goes. You know, we're all humans here with, I think, good hearts. And, you know, one thing you told me earlier, I want to tell the guests, was pretty cool. You know, with your show, you've been able to really use the radio as a platform. And you had told us that Kevin Lyles actually called up and was willing to donate a significant amount of money. And
yeah, he was checking in with a bunch of DJs and people in the cities, and I was, you know, someone reached out to me, and he was donating on my behalf, which was great, to build up the Lake City Council. But just to have someone like that who's been a part of the game in so many different ways, you know, I'm still a kid, man. You know, I'm still geeking because COSMO BAKER's in here. You know what I'm saying?
Me too.
Yeah. Hey, same here.
Yeah. So it's just to be where I am now, and the possibilities of where it can go for another 20 years. Shit. So I'm just happy to be here, guys.
Yeah, well, and we appreciate that nice segue into our next guest. He is definitely amongst DJs and producers an icon, a legend. I will say it because I've been a fan of his for a long time. Owning a record store, I would certainly just love the days when you'd see a record from the Rub come in, part of the crew that he was in. Another one of my hero DJs, King Britt. This man shared a party with him called Back to Basics. It's a legendary party in Philly. He moved to Brooklyn, worked at 8 Ball Records, another iconic record store. I used to stand at the window and wait to get buzzed in. It was like one of the most exhilarating feelings to get the buzzer that allows you to come into that place back in the 90s for sure. And, you know, he's all over the place, DJing, spreading love, spreading music, using his platform for activism. Let's give it up for our man, COSMO BAKER.
COSMO BAKER.
Yeah. You got the drop right. Thank you, Stylus. Yeah, you made me feel mad old with that intro.
Yeah, sorry, man. I think
do that here and there.
It's coming into fashion, man. It's good.
Yeah. You know, look, if you wear it well, right? You know. But yeah, I'm really, really glad to be here. Thank you for putting this together, and I'm really, really psyched to be here with all my fellow participants.
Well, we are really appreciative of you, and can't wait to get into some of these conversations that I know we're really itching. So we're gonna keep running it down. This gentleman, turntablist, based out of Chicago in the Scratcher Chicago crew, 2014 BMC World Team. He is currently advocating against systematic racism and racial bias found in the nightclub scene in Chicago and also all around the country. If you've been following him. He is one of the dopest DJs skill-wise, and always, when I've seen him do battles and routines, he's always putting a little bit more of that conscious effort into it. Let's give it up for RTST.
Yeah.
Yo, what up, y'all? I'm all right. I'm not that great. No, I'm just playing. It's an honor to be here, y'all. Thank you for having me.
Well, we really appreciate you taking time out, and you know, looking forward to hearing, you know, you were one of the first guys that I saw really call out the industry in a way that
in a loud and very important way.
Long overdue. And
definitely need to talk about that tonight.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And last but certainly not least,
I'm sure he's ready.
This native New Yorker, Brooklyn born, whose mission in life is to make life better for the marginalized groups that built NYC. She moonlights as a DJ and spent most of her career working at nonprofits creating affordable housing but has now been working for the past few years as an urban planner, working with communities to address issues around economic development and racial justice. She is one of the creators of Donuts Are Forever, an annual fundraiser in tribute to Jay Dilla, which has raised tens of thousands of dollars for various nonprofit organizations. Also a resident DJ and co-organizer of the Makosa Cookout, a bi-coastal summertime series featuring DJs and food. Makosa stands for diverse, vibrant community and creates a safe space where people of color can express their culture and celebrate themselves. Let's give it up for DJ Tara.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us and taking time out of, I'm sure, what is probably just a crazy spin of the last 3 months, being from what you do on a daily to coronavirus and the epicenter and then the uprisings. It must just be nuts being in New York City these days.
It is, but it's still, I mean, that's why I live here. I've been here all my life, so summer's always crazy here. So this is great. I mean, it's a good energy, even though it's definitely upside down right now, but it's a good energy.
And I was just curious on a personal level with Makosa, is that Cameroon from Manu Dibango? Is that the inspiration for it, or is it? Yeah,
it is. Because it means dance, and we had actually, it's a party that actually originated in the Bay. Our partner, One Way Possible, lives out in the Bay. Came to New York one summer many years, 10 years ago actually now. We're about to do, this was supposed to be our 11th year. Did a party in the backyard of my friend's store. We just linked up and we were like, we should just do this. And we've been doing it every summer ever since. Once a month, he flies out from the Bay to come to New York. We do it in LA as well. We've also taken it to a few other cities. So it's a great name that encompasses everything, but we really just want people to dance and eat and have a good time, just like you would at a cookout if your friends just were having a kickback in their crib.
That's what's up, man. I need to make it to one. That's for sure. I'm ready.
Absolutely, please. Well, not this summer. We're doing it on Twitch, but next summer, hopefully, if everything's safe, we'll be back up on a rooftop. So we would love it if you came.
Nice. Now, I was curious, were you working in your field, your day job, before you were DJing, or was it something that kind of came at the same time? Or
it came at the same time. I had like a life revelation where I was about to move, and I decided to not move, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to stay in New York, what are you going to do? So I was like, well, two things I really wanted to do was learn how to DJ and go back to school. I was working at a bank. It wasn't my thing. And realized like this was something that had kind of been always in the back of my mind all my life. Like Alchemist, my dad took me to my first protest when I was 10. Always like just had a sense that I needed to just do better and not just work making money for someone else. Rather make no money and work for a nonprofit, but I never regret it. I took a pay cut. I never regretted a day in my life, straight up. So yeah, it was like kind of came together at the same time. I used to throw parties before I became a DJ and started doing the urban planning thing, but before then, all that kind of came at the same time.
Yeah, and I think I would imagine the work that you do on the day, sometimes that release of being able to play music after a trying day or going through some of the bureaucracy of working in urban planning and the I'm sure the obstacles that you come across, like some days just like I just can't wait to get and play this music that just is going to speak to your situation. I think it's interesting as DJs, we're always told like, all right, you're on. If you're not having fun, nobody's having fun. But the way that we translate fun doesn't always have to be on a surface of fluff and of superficial fun. It's like a lot of times that fun can come from just playing really meaningful music, so I appreciate you for doing that and being this contributor to humanity in so many different ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all of you. I mean, we're all here together. We're all doing the work. It takes all of us. It takes every single fucking person on this planet, honestly, to do it. So.
Yep.
Yeah. And Cosmo, like, for those that know you, have known that where you've been on your mindset. Just if they, some of the things that I love about you are just when you write. you know, I think you're a really gifted writer. I maybe right up there with your DJ skills. Honestly, I want to see. I'm calling you right now. I'm telling you. I want to see the Cosmo Baker book at some point.
Please.
I do, and basically just based on your, you know, just when you go down rabbit holes on Twitter of artists or musicians, I'm a fan of it. I really like what you do. I really like how you incorporate music and society and what was happening with those bands. You know, if anybody's ever seen when you wrote about the Beastie Boys, when with the passing of it was incredible. I mean, I was in tears. Just I was in the living room with you. That you wrote it so poignantly and perfectly. But tell us about that. Tell us about what inspires you to write. You know, when and use that.
Well, I've always written. It's actually something that I've done since I was a kid. You know, with journals of poetry and, you know, short stories and things like that. You know, the act of writing as an extension of your voice is something that I've always kind of had an innate understanding of that connection. You know, somebody told me years ago, I can't remember who it was. They said, and I'm going to say this with all humility, hey, Cosmo, I love your writing. You're a really good writer. Do you know why I know? Because when I read it, I hear your voice. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's something that always kind of resonated with me. And, you know, a shit ton of people have said, hey, when are we going to get the book? When are we going to get the book? And who knows, man, we'll see. You know, I got to figure out how to, you know, get my discipline in order to actually buckle down and do that. But yeah, you know, the thing about it is I mean, ultimately it's a matter of communication and telling stories, which in a sense is what we also do as DJs, you know? So it really is, it's almost like second nature to me, in the sense that, you know, if I'm DJing, I'm trying to actually spin some sort of narrative, some sort of cohesive narrative over the course of the 2 hours or the 3 hours that I'm playing, right? You know, and it's the same thing with when I put pen to paper or fingers to keyboards, you know, and the same way that I like to, in my DJ sets, have some sort of allusion to maybe a deeper subtext. You know, it's just natural for me to, when I write, I that just kind of comes out. Other than when I'm on Twitter and I'm just like popping shit.
Yeah, but some of those
I also do a lot.
Some of those rabbit holes have been on Twitter. Like, you know, I don't know if anybody has seen it, but you know, when the way you went on Snickers, man, that I just love that one. That has to be in the book, because it was just the way that you describe DJing and what DJs do, or what at least speaks to me as why I DJ. It was just very spot on and perfect. And
well, yeah, I mean, they needed to be called out. I mean, you have a $1 billion corporation, Mars or whomever, you know, and, you know, in their misguided attempt to make fun of basically what is a relatively large segment of a working class population, trying to portray it as being not accomplished, trying to portray it as being trite, you know, lesser than, you know. And I know so many people who make their living as working class blue collar DJs, people who may actually have day jobs and they subsidize their income and they actually pay their bills and take care of their families by doing something which they love, is creative expression, and actually serves a community. It serves the community the way that us DJs do, with entertaining people, educating them, giving them a safe haven, allowing them to being a voice for those who don't have voices, you know. So listen, a major corporation is gonna show their ass like that. I'm gonna smack it.
Yeah.
You know,
smack it, flip it, rub it down.
Yeah.
All of it. That's what's up. I mean, BONICS, you know, you've been on the show now. This is your second time, and you know, when we started this show, it was mostly because we were trying to just use this time to reach other DJs and connect with each other, but also connect the DJ culture, not only our students, but also our friends and other like-minded DJs that jive with us, about just being stuck in the house. And then, you know, last time we talked to you, we were talking about the radio station, what that was, how that was, and then here we are. You became an epicenter. You're the epicenter. You're the voice of the street at this point. You're on the radio. You're able to send that power out to people. And how's that been for you personally? And
you know, man, by you saying that, a part of me also feels like I'm not doing enough because I am in the epicenter. But at the same time, like, there's so many sensitive things going on, and I'm working every day. I'm on the radio every day. And what I was saying to you guys before is that there is a self-preservation about it, because if I put myself in the front line consistently and I do something that hurts myself or others, or then a person like me won't be a voice on the radio. You feel me? And so I look at it as that I have this little piece of a stage on the radio that I'm able to, convey a message that I've been doing even before all this. Really is just love. But it's different now because even showing compassion and shit is hard too, by experience. And that's tough because I know where I'm coming from, but if it's being received differently. But back to you were saying about Minneapolis, man, I think about it. I think about what Dave Chappelle said too about, hey, I'll take the back seat. He's still in the car, but he's going to use his voice as strategically as he can, but he also doesn't want to talk over people either. So it's, I've been just trying to share the voices, and also I'm going through this process too, like the pandemic, and my bank and my post office and my neighbors are affected by this. Obviously, I've been to Ground Zero, whatever, where George Floyd is, and that's a whole different feeling. So it's a lot. You saw the bus almost crash into the crowd there. You've seen the riots on it. You've seen all of this. And so having the radio actually feels good too, because unlike on our Twitters or whatever, we can be extreme if we choose to be extreme about our messaging. But I have limits that I have to play on the radio, which is fair because we don't all like the same music, and so, but we all like music, right? So what I like to say is I made a comparison is like right now, there are two people who come from two different places that don't agree on the same stuff, but they can like the same song, right? So that's how I want to walk and talk right now, is that little fine line of how can I walk and talk in that way of, being compassionate and stuff. So it's a little tough, man. I'm struggling a little bit, I'll be honest. But, being in Ground Zero here, man, I'm experiencing it. And if anything, sharing the voices on the radio immediately in those days after everything happened, call the radio up. Where can you drop donations? Where do you need donations? It was like, it felt like you were an operator almost, because it'd be a bunch of people saying, hey, where can I drop things off? Where can I do this? And just to have people to express themselves on the radio, I think is amazing, because they get to say how they feel, and we are like owned live and local. We are live and local, so it's pretty emotional, man. I haven't quite figured it out, but I do know that my message has been the same, which is like just trying to love, and I know there's people that listen to our station who definitely like Trump, right? But how can I give them a message that may bring us closer? Because I'm unable to be extreme, but
Well, actually, I want to jump in right there. Something that you said that connects with what Cosmo was saying about being a servant of the community and using your DJ skills to do that. That's a perfect bridge because you've got that radio platform and you're able to walk the walk on the streets and see and feel what everybody else in your community is feeling. But to underline what you said about the Dave Chappelle quote, Dave Chappelle is the only celebrity that I look up to as like someone I would want to sit down and have a conversation with. And in that same special, he said it's important that we recognize that in any movement, there's going to be imperfect allies. Right. So where we have a place that we are feeling, all right, well, it's not my space. We've talked before we went live here as performers, as DJs, as artists, where we've been told for years to not use our platforms and our voice in the way that you're doing it. I think it's really important to acknowledge that even though that might feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome, you're doing exactly what's necessary right now to bridge those gaps for the listener who doesn't understand or agree with you. and bringing them to the place where they can have the conversation with somebody on the other side.
I think it's that J. Cole thing going on right now is like really a great example of
perfect timing. Yeah,
what you're talking about, because it's so interesting because No Name is obviously passionate and J. Cole's an intelligent guy too. We know J. Cole's an intelligent guy. It's just a good example of where different people are in this. And it speaks to what we're talking about now.
For sure. I think we all have different roles to play. This thing has multiple layers and it has multiple voices and multiple angles that have to be attacked and explored. And, not everybody can be at the front of the plane. Somebody has to sometimes be on the wheels or preparing the meals or whatever it is. We all have a role and there's going to be time to stand up and scream. There's also going to be time to do what you're doing. I think most importantly, we have to stay united in all of us that really want to see it's as basic as right and wrong. These are very common human principles that we're asking people to abide by. We're not asking people to do something extreme. You're actually being extreme by being
Right.
non-inclusive, or by not wanting to treat others the way you want to be treated. It's a very simple, just those things that we learn as little kids, like treat others the way you want to be treated. It's just, and you can stop the conversation there. If you're going to be judgmental or prejudiced or racist to somebody, how would you not expect the same treatment back? And I think artists, when you kind of came out on some of your platforms and really going and exposing what happens to DJs, whether themselves are being a victim of racism and prejudice and bias, or being told what to play because of what a club manager or owner sees. I applaud you for standing out and doing that, because a lot of people would just keep going and say, hey, I just need that check this week, so I'm just going to go play. And talk to us about what kind of built you up into saying, I'm going with this. I'm going to put this out into the world.
Well, I think kind of what spurred it is just like, the constant injustice that happens in this country, really. Like, and I think with like George Floyd happening, or his passing happening, it was, that struck a chord with me. That struck a chord with my wife. It struck a chord with this whole country, more or less. It's just like it got everyone, talking about not just like, unjust deaths, but like everything else that's kind of like, no one's being held accountable for up until now. So I think that conversation kind of just snowballed into just like this, this big thing where just like, we need to hold people accountable. Like, people have gone on too long, just doing the most overt or subtle, like, type of racism, you know what I'm saying? So I think that just going to the protests kind of just, amplified that for me. I've been going to, maybe like a protest maybe like once or twice a week since George Floyd's passing. So like just kind of just, getting the sense of where people are at, it kind of just brought me back to myself. Like I've like kind of just made me remember, like, what have I experienced? I'm Filipino, but to be real with you, like Asians are very,
we're silent. We're silent when it comes to like racial,
Yeah, we're very privileged, and but like at the same time, I've dealt, I've had my fair share of like racist attacks. So while DJing specifically,
Sure.
like, yeah, I'd be like playing hip hop in a club, and a manager would come to me. It's like, yo, can you change this? We're not trying to bring that type of people in here. And just like, it made me think about all the times I've dealt with that. And, it's hard to, like, kind of just let yourself die a little bit just so you can make some money. And I did that way too many times, to be, to like, to the point where I'm like, who am I? What am I doing? This is absolutely wrong. So I think the reason why I started talking about it is because, you know, part of the reason why I started talking about it is because we're in quarantine and all these clubs and bars are closed right now.
Yeah.
And normally, if you would speak against them, ultimately they would just brush them off, or they would replace you with another DJ. Simple as that. And to be real with you, I haven't DJed at these like type of spots in years. Had to be years. And ultimately, it got me to the point to just start talking about this because, I mean, why not? Like we're all on a level playing ground right now. These clubs aren't, you know, going to do anything right now because no one's going to their spot.
They might not be there when we come out of this anyway. Some
Absolutely,
of them
yeah.
already dropping like flies. you
Yeah,
know?
a lot of these venues just have such thin margins. We've talked about that in previous episodes. That's really good that in this time where there's nothing happening, this is a really good chance for people to analyze that. But I think it's going to be helpful for our audience. I think that because we also, as Beat Refinery, as a music school, have younger students who might not have club experience or might not have been to a club, can you kind of elaborate a little bit, artists, as to some of that coded language that us as club DJs, professional DJs, are used to hearing for anybody who might not be a DJ that's watching?
Yeah, and I think people have every DJ's kind of gotten their own version of this, but like the stuff I've heard, like, yeah, can you switch up the music? You know, we don't want that type of crowd as one. So, like that type of crowd meaning
It's
like
getting
black and brown
dark
people.
in here. That's like one of the main
That's
ones
what I've in the past
that I've hated.
just as egregious. Yeah, I mean, it's not even just from the DJ's perspective. It's also just like the industry overall. There's just racial bias through and through. You see it in the dress code. You see it in how, you know, bartenders treat their patrons. You know, you see from like security just like pulling a dude just because he thought he was doing wrong. Actually, you know what's funny? Like I've stepped outside of these clubs and they actually stopped me for wearing the wrong type of shoes, and I was DJing. So I had to get someone to get me in. So the dress code alone, it singles out, you know, specific community clearly. Yeah. Like I'll call one out right now. Bottled Blonde here in Chicago was notorious for doing that. Like they basically, like they more or less want you to dress like you came out of a J. Crew catalog. Like absolutely.
I was DJing at a club once. This is years ago, maybe 15 years or so ago. I was DJing and they almost didn't let me in for wearing jeans. The name of the club was Denim.
What?
Yeah, I honestly, I have more stories probably on two hands that I can count of doing this as being like when it came to, I guess, professional, like I guess full time working as a music person. You know, in my 20s, I kind of just went to clubs just as a patron to hang out and stuff, and I had so many issues getting in. Like they would pick on any little thing. Go to CVS, boy, and buy a white T-shirt, and I'll let you in.
Jeez.
You know, no sneakers, no this, that. But then as soon as I became a DJ, literally I could just wear whatever and walk in, and I would kind of own that. You know, it was one of those things I felt like I earned. You know, and I would let people know, like, you know. And I think the thing is, one thing to combat that is like, at least what I do is I'm just friendly to everybody. But I think that's the mind state of someone like myself. If, you know, I don't look at anybody, you know, one way or another. I think if I'm going to come work at your place and I'm coming in contact with you, you know, bar back manager, GM, you know, whatever level you're on, you know, there's a mutual respect there that we are all working on the clock that night. At least that's the way I look at it. And I think a lot of other DJs, you know, like who got like big heads, they come in and they forget about the idea that they're there, if not only as a highlighted guest, but they're there to help that, you know, help that place.
Well,
I had like the opposite experience when I was just a patron. No problem getting in, but once I said I was the DJ, lots of clubs were like, no way, like, wow, there's no way a female can be a DJ. They would quiz me on like hip hop knowledge. Only later then to tell me not to play hip hop because they didn't want black people in the club.
Wow.
Like, I can't tell you how many clubs like put their foot down, almost didn't let me in the door, gave me so much shit. And it was 100% always the same clubs who later, you know, also had some sort of like racist attitude. And I think it's really interesting. I've always believed that all the causes, you know, can be connected, that everything is kind of you know, related to each other. And I think it's no coincidence that the club owners and the club managers who hate women in positions of even tiny positions of power, right? Because you know, DJs are at the bottom of the totem pole really in the club scene, but it's like they didn't want to see a woman in that position, and they didn't want black people in their club, you know.
Absolutely.
And so it's kind of like gravitated towards clubs that were a little more accepting and inclusive, and you know, had black managers and things like that. But I just think it's interesting we had opposite experiences there.
No, but it's funny though, Alchemist, because you know, you're absolutely right about, you know, how all the struggles are all connected, right?
Yeah.
And they're all concurrent as well.
Yes.
And never fucking ending. You know.
But with that said, though, I mean, the reason why I started talking about them now is because everything's ended right now for them currently. Like, no, you can literally. I think the top word like this last few weeks has just been accountability. Like everybody has been like, everybody who's like claiming solidarity, you go in their comments, you just see like all like everybody like just, you know, shoot out every egregious, every, you know,
flaming
just going off on these guys.
Their asses. They showed their asses. They tried to say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, or we're here and we're, you know, trying to support a cause that we know that all this time they've been the exact opposite.
They've been doing otherwise, right?
They did it for the picking. I think that's what it is. Like I've had to go to venues in New York that have, you know, they put up their little black square and said they're bullshit. And I was like, okay, if you say Black Lives Matter, why haven't you paid your DJs? Why, you know, I straight up like that. Like why, you know?
Or why don't you hire black DJs?
Yeah, it's just it's like you're putting it out there. If we're gonna, you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. I mean, that's really
absolutely
how it's going. And it's
we need to talk about it ultimately. I mean, like these clubs might see it as a tax, but that's accountability. You have to take, you know, you have to take responsibility for those actions.
It's not a tax.
I see As1 is trolling us right now with his background.
Basically.
Yeah. No, but you're all right though. I mean, here's the thing. Like you know, like Malcolm X said, it's like chickens coming home to roost, right?
Yep.
Because now, as we've seen, there's been a complete leveling of the playing field, and everything is out there. Everybody is exposed, right? So you can't fake the funk on this. You know, the idea of what Tara was talking about with these clubs that are putting up these performative gestures with a black fucking square, which really means nothing.
Yep.
You know, you're not going to move the needle by a fucking Instagram post. Come on, you know. How you're going to move the needle is to actually change, adopt, and actually embody right practices and right philosophies. You know, the you know, I think about, and I'm actually really, really lucky because I had not really had that much experience with this type of behavior and these environments. You know, we've been able to do stuff in clubs, you know, that we were friends with the owner, you know, Southpaw, and you know, and doing stuff with the Do-Over and all the stuff here in Philadelphia with a bunch of the clubs where I would have residencies. So, you know, I thankfully, for better or for worse, I never really had that much of that type of experience. But I know that it's real, and I'm aware that it's rampant. You know, if we look at this behavior, and I know this conversation is going to go all across the spectrum, but if we're just talking about nightclubs, you know, what they're doing is basically propagating their own mini microcosm of white supremacy here within this little pocket of capital gain where they can exploit black culture. They can work to the bone black and brown folk for no fucking pay to entertain rich, white, maybe not even rich, but privileged white people who want nothing to do with the people. They just want to cherry pick culture.
Yep.
And white people are getting paid off of that. And it just completely, it becomes, it's in perpetuity.
And they don't want, I mean, as ironic as it sounds, like a club is never an inclusive place for like a black and brown person. And yeah, ultimately, like they're really afraid like of having their whiteness stripped if there's, you know, too many of us in like one room. And
that's the hypocrisy right there, man. Like, you know, like like DJs play black music, but you know, you can't come in to the club wearing, you know, what the music is basically like the lifestyle, basically wearing hip hop, like that's why Jay-Z had to
Wear that hat.
change clothes. Can't even wear a hat, It's like,
No
yeah.
Timberlands. No
Speaking
Timbs,
of,
bro.
And speaking of dress codes, like not even a dress code. There's like primers that you get for DJs. Like that's our dress code. If you go to a specific bar, like they'll tell you like what you can and cannot play, and usually those are fine as long as they're worded right. But I came across one recently where it was just like no urban, no disposable like urban shit. I'm like, wow. If you're gonna play a trap song, it's gotta be a rework of it. Like, what's a reworked trap song? It's just like,
I'm surprised they dug that deep into.
Yeah, they want to be elevated, but like that's just like
search the record pools.
Want like
Yeah.
the house version.
play the up tempo version.
But I mean that's also speaks to like why like hip hop has to be really watered down to even be played at like these spots. So like it's like not even black anymore, for lack of a better term. Like it's jacked up. Like there's like all these little, there's like a It's like as Cosmo said, it was perpetuating. Like all this stuff kind of like lingers on. They're all parallel.
I think my generation of hip hop crew, that we all came up early 80s of being so excited for the music that we were in the DC area. It was just most people didn't really listen to hip hop. So if you actually found other people that listen to hip hop, that was all you could focus on. It didn't matter about anything but studying the culture and being in love with the culture. And for me, all my heroes were black. All the people, I remember being in the car one time and my mom had a radio. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. My mom had her radio station on, which was probably like, Wash FM or something here in DC. People know that. And I had been listening to the Run DMC Raising Hell album like back to back to back to back every day. And I said to my mom, like, Mom, I can't listen to this white music. And she was just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't listen to this music. And that was the day that she was like, well, I guess you're gonna just listen to this music. And she was just kind of learning what hip hop was herself, and for her it was just a, well, my son loves this music and he's going to go with this music and do what he wants to do. And subsequently, as we were 15 years old, a lot of the kids my age, we were starting to sneak into all the clubs in DC, and the only clubs you could sneak into were the gay clubs. And the gay clubs in DC were the joints, and in the late 80s and early 90s, where everybody went, where I didn't see what you guys are talking about in the sense of, you can't get in because you look like this or that. Because in the gay club, it was just like, everybody come, let's listen to house music and the what did they call the back room? It had like the Ministry and like 9 Inch Nails and Depeche Mode, and then in the other room you had all the early classic house jams and disco jams, and everybody was just loving music, and it wasn't until this almost maybe the bottle service industry side of it, at least for me, where I started to see like, oh wow, like
the whackness,
or just like to the point where capitalism controls everything. Capitalism and racism are so tied together. They are intertwined, and you can see the people that are so much for capitalism and racism. They usually extend the same gestures, the same notions, the same fears, the same appropriations that they want to look for. I can't tell you how many times a club owner is when you played your heart out and the club was packed and everybody was having a great time, but because there wasn't enough bottles sold, they're like, tonight was whack.
Yeah.
And you're just like, just stab me in the heart, why don't you? Because I'm sitting here trying to play music that I love and seeing the reaction when all of us have those nights where you get stuck in a spot where you're like, man, this crowd doesn't know it. They're very, you got to handle them with kid gloves. And then there's the nights where you can just keep going down the rabbit hole of music and they're with you. And then to hear the club owner not understand that, or the manager not understand that. And then the nights that you hated where they were like, tonight was great because some dude popped off and bought 5 bottles of Ace of Spades, It's like,
and you played Kesha 4 times.
Or yeah, had to download this song right now because he won't spend the money until this song comes out with the girls holding the bottles. I'm like, really?
The worst.
I think that right there actually is where a lot of this gets perpetuated from, and this is something that I'm fascinated by. Would love to see like a more organized study around this, but the whole idea that nightlife exists and we are like the catalyst within nightlife that bring people together with the music, but nightlife is selling sex and social status. And as we were saying earlier, there's that hierarchy of like who's allowed in the door. Okay, if you're wearing Tim's and you're brown, then that's not okay. But if you're wearing Tim's and you're white, well, we might let that slide.
Right.
And then there's these little filters along the way. Or if you're standing up, then you're obviously low class. If you've got a table, then you're important. And then it gets more and more specific into the person that can afford the most bottles gets whatever they want. And then it creates that power structure where us as the catalyst, we come in because we love the job of bringing people together, but the infrastructure around a nightclub or around these kind of bottle service models that really keep clubs and lounges functioning and profitable right now is built around separating people into small groups, isolating the most powerful, wealthy, attractive person in the room, and making everybody look at them when the sparklers come out and say, hey, you should want to be that person. You want to sit next to the DJ and tell them what to do. And that makes our job seem a lot less valuable because we're not the star of the show, whether you wanted to be or not. It's about separating people at that point. And I think I've never really had a chance to have these kind of conversations with anyone outside of the DJ space. I'm getting text messages right now from people that are not DJs that are listening in. So I'm very happy that this is a place that we are all kind of able to examine this a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that structure is not exclusive to the nightclubs either, though. That's kind of how our whole society is built, and people are becoming more and more woke to that fact, because of some of these horrible incidents that are happening, with the police murdering people, and it's just kind of blowing open the whole system, right? And everybody's kind of like seeing like, wow, there's a lot of fucked up shit happening, and it's kind of affecting everybody in every little piece of my life, and so I think I think the nightclub has kind of gotten away with maybe maintaining that structure and those power dynamics, maybe in a darker, like creepier way, because it is kind of just a below the surface kind of environment, if that makes any sense. But go ahead.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right about that, though, Alchemist. And to kind of even expand on that a little bit, like I think that there's not a lot of eyes on nightclubs, except for in an insular way within our industry, And I think that by and large, the vast amount of the population of our world and our country thinks of nightclubs as being seedy and underbelly and all that stuff. All the good shit, which actually it kind of is, and again, which is kind of the bedrock of nightclubs, but you're absolutely right about how that is just a microcosm of the larger story. And on that note, I also think that you're absolutely right about what is happening right now in June of 2020. This has really been a very strange and arduous and brutalizing odyssey for everybody over the course of the past several months, from the pandemic and the uncertainty that brings, and the roller coaster of emotions and the fear and the peril that it's instilled in all of us. Obviously, we've had 3.5 years of living under an oppressive regime here in the United States, and I call it a regime by design. And then you have what is not, the economic collapse, which hasn't even really begun yet. We're going to see the fallout of that in the months and years to come. And then with the murder of another black man in the streets, George Floyd, which was the match into the powder keg, which is explode. Thank fucking God it's exploding, because it's about time. And the thing about it is, though, I kind of want to bring it back to what you were talking about, how collectively everybody's kind of waking up. I'm sure that everybody on this panel has had their own engagement in in their mind and in the way that they kind of go through life. But it's a really interesting thing to me over the course of the past several months. And I want to say this with the caveat that I'm almost kind of embarrassed to say this. I'm almost embarrassed to say that over the past couple months, several months, as crazy and as fucked up it's also been really exciting. And it's also been really, really invigorating in the sense that we are now collectively seeing this awakening, because it's almost like
change is supposed to be exciting, so that's what we're going through. You know?
So like, all right, so you know the old story, the emperor's new clothes, right?
Yeah.
Right? We're kind of seeing that play out in real time, where people are saying, oh, wow, okay, guess what? Oh, the government, oh, they're completely inept. Oh, capitalism, oh, it's completely fucking flawed. Oh, our healthcare system, it's completely non-existent. And it's this slow moving boulder that I think as of now in 2020, June of 2020, I don't think the momentum is going to stop.
No.
I hope not. I think what we've learned in a lot of this, and it even started in 2008, but capitalism is only a parameter that we have to live by. Big businesses, they live by socialism. They get the money from the government all the time when they need it, but the people, we never see it. So, you know, if we own a airline and we need some of that government money because we're going under, they're going to give it to us. Or if we own a car dealer, Ford or GM, but us,
it's not businesses, it's mega corporations.
Yeah, mega corporations, they don't have to abide by those. Now they want capitalism when things are going and they're back on the treadmill and they're pumping and pumping, but when their oxygen is gone, they're begging for it. They're in need of it. And
economics 101.
Yeah, and absolutely. You know, and that's the one thing I have to say I'm so moved by. I have a 12-year-old daughter. And I'm so moved by that generation, the young generation up into like the early 20s, of how on fire they are for a lot of issues, for saving the planet, for for equality, for economic fairness. There's so many things that young people are just like no more. And and you can even use the forefathers. If people want to always spout the forefathers were always like, the old people, they were all young and they were in their, except for George Washington, a lot of them were in their 20s and 30s as they were writing these constitutions, as they were uprising from the king. And so even Thomas Jefferson said himself, he's like, once a person gets to a certain age, they shouldn't be allowed to make voice anymore, because they're not going to be here anymore. And it's really, I think we're seeing it happen to where the younger generation is just going to not take it.
Yeah.
They're better than we were in that sense.
Oh, yeah.
They have more tools too. I think the internet has provided that space a little bit.
Yeah, the kids are definitely all right. Definitely better than a bunch of racist fucking founding fathers. Slave.
Yeah.
Don't quote Washington.
Pardon me. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's crazy how messed up our culture is in that fact right there. Is we spout the founding fathers, and these dudes were pretty, they were just trading one evil for a different evil for their own. Like, we don't want to be under him. We wanted to control our own evil.
Right.
We don't need him controlling our evil.
I love that way of painting it.
It's like the WWF, like the bad guys. It's like when the bad guy turns on the bad guy, and like, oh, the bad guy turned on the bad guy. They're still bad guys.
Heel on heel action.
More sound effects, please.
Now, Tara, you've got to be seeing this. I mean, in what you do on your day job, and how you have to combat especially the economic side of racism, and kind of walk us through some of the things that you've kind of experienced, or really what some of the things that you want to enlighten us about.
Oh, that's a lot. Okay, so I mean, I understand seeing like the excitement in all of this, but I think for a lot of people, especially myself as a Black woman, it's like I'm I don't wish anyone to be in this situation. As somebody who has had to experience racism, discrimination all my life. I'm saying this not in a woe is me, feel sorry for me, victimized way, but in a way of like, this is my reality. And it's great that people have been waking up and they realize it's fucked up, but at the same time, like, it's welcome to the party. Also, like, you just got here for that. And then also considering the fact that like, this is something that I work on the daily. It's frustrating. But I also know part of what brought me to where I was is just like going to school, learning about things that you don't learn about in school, learning about how, you know, thinking about when my mom and dad were looking to move us, because I was in Brooklyn, but they, you know, Brooklyn was wild in the 80s. They were like, we got to get out of here. So they wanted to move out and move to the suburbs, of course. And even that, like having my mom and dad being steered towards certain neighborhoods, not white neighborhoods, or, you know, less white neighborhoods, because they, you know, in the way of like just perpetuating racism and segregation, and realizing my mom had challenges there. And then even my own challenges when I moved out, when I was older, trying to find my own place to live, and realizing like, this shit's fucked up here. And then realizing like, it's fucked up for me who has an education, who has a good job, who has all of these things. You know, imagine me, but with less. And the thought of that, me knowing that like at any moment, if I lose a job, if I, you know, any kind of, you know, tragedy befalls me, I could just end up very well as, you know, like that person. I was like, no, we got to do something better, because nobody should have to, you know, choose between paying their rent and eating food. And that's honestly like that is very much a reality for many people in this country, especially people in New York, when people pay over 50% of their income towards rent, when affordability is supposed to be more like 30%. You know, seeing people who are homeless on the street and don't have to be, not because they don't have, you know, they have issues, and really if you can put them in a safe place and provide them with, you know, services that they can access to stabilize their situation, they could thrive, instead of building a shelter. Just seeing all of that and understanding really like what all of this is about, kind of drove me to that. And I think like a lot of people, like I think a lot of people just are really not educated and understanding what has brought us to this situation, what has brought us to this point. A lot of it is very much intentional. It is very much planned. It's very much people don't give a fuck. It's very much a situation of our, you know, our wealth and resources being taken out of our communities in our own hands. And that's everybody, white, Black, Asian, everybody, you know, towards like, you know, very rich, white, corporations and banks and things of that sort. So, you know, it's great that people are getting wind of it and understanding it, but to me, it kind of surprises me, because again, like, I just feel like how is it not so apparent? You may not know the workings or the history around it. Granted, at this point, it's very easy with the internet to kind of get a sense and read a book and, you know, and do those things. But to me, it's I feel like, yeah, it's just something that I've always had to deal with to some degree. Education to, again, like finding a place to live, clubs at this rate. I can't say I haven't experienced discrimination in a club, but at this rate, I'm also old enough to know that my money speaks a lot. And I tell people I will choose not to go to places. I tell people not to go to places. I do not approach certain places to DJ. I know, you know, people who approach me. I think Cosmo, he had mentioned that he has never experienced that, because people, you know, he of course the legend. So
because Cosmo's the shit.
Yeah, and people know what, you know, like people know what he's about. So, you know, and I, you know, not to say that I'm definitely not, but I think also like, if you're hiring me, especially if you know me and you're hiring me, you know what I'm about. So you're not going to come up to me and tell me not to play hip hop unless you want a situation.
And that's what it should be, honestly.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but I definitely understand, like, people want to make money, and also we are ultimately here because we want to share music that we appreciate. And a lot of us, you know, being that we DJing is rooted in hip hop. So it's natural, even if you are somebody who may not play hip hop, you know, solely on a day-to-day. I feel like everyone's kind of rooted in it because of the origins. So Oh God, it's like I'm really like long-winded with the answer, but it's
That's what we were hoping for.
Yes.
to me,
The truth.
yeah, but to me, it's just a matter of like like trying to maintain and trying to move forward. Definitely trying to balance, understanding when I'm out doing, at least what I do in my day job, like what's at stake. Not to put too much pressure, because again, I'm still one person, but ultimately like understanding that, I love my city. I've been here all my life. I should probably leave, but, knowing enough that like, I want to contribute. Part of what makes New York City so dope are the people who are suffering right now. People who built this city, people who go to work every day, the people who've been going to work every day during this pandemic, who live so far away that they have to take 2-3 buses, a subway. When the governor shut down the subway overnight, that shit was infuriating, because it's like, who's in the middle? People in the middle of the night rely on that subway. It's bad enough that they already have to like basically be on that shit for like an hour and a half, but now you're basically like tripling their commute time because you're shutting down the subway. Someone got shot and killed at a bus stop in the Bronx overnight because he worked overnight, and his family was like, he wouldn't be at the bus stop normally. It's because the subway wasn't working. So shit like that infuriates me, but it also like it makes you want to speak out more. It makes you want to like get up and go to work and do the work to try to affect this change. But it's very incremental. And I think people need to understand that. Like, there have been a lot of really great things going on right now. And a lot of people with the protest people, it's been 3 weeks now going on in New York, every day. To some, there's some sort of rally, some sort of march. It's amazing to see. But I also, people need to realize that this is very incremental. And if you're here, you're going to be here for the long haul. Hopefully it will happen in our lifetimes. I mean, I'm older now. I hope it's in my lifetime, but but at the same time, like, if we're pushing a boulder up a hill, I'm going to push as much as I can until the next person comes and continues the push.
I hope so. Hate to break the discussion right here, but we're at the top of the hour right now. Again, if anyone on the stream wants to join the Zoom chat and talk directly to our guest, just hit up that link on the screen, bit.ly/the9at9. As always, we have students watching the stream. We always like to use this platform to educate. We have our associate producer, Adrian. He's been collecting questions from the audience. So we're going to do a quick Q&A with our guests right now. So I am going to promote, let's get Doc Blast.
Doc Blast in the place.
Adrian up in here and ask these questions.
Hey everybody. How's it going?
Hey, yo.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing everything and being as open as we are. This needs to be talked about. So I want to ask everybody some questions. For someone who might be starting, do you find it difficult to balance, let's say, we were talking about earlier, like having fun as a DJ, but also sharing your message. How do you find the balance between getting political and also having fun as a DJ? Is it even necessary to have fun as a DJ and to have that positive vibe?
I think getting political is fun.
Yeah, same. You don't have to be preachy. You don't have to be, I'm not going to put Public Enemy on and the coup on all night and be like, yeah, but, there are, and honestly, like, again, because a lot of the music that I play is Black music, it's rooted, it is political. And I've, again, in trying to call out to people, those, that music generated out of pain, out of situations that we've been in throughout our time in this country. So it's inescapable. So, even playing something that may not be on its face very political, to me is. There's a joy in that. There's a time when they didn't want us to sing. They didn't want us to be happy. They don't want us to be as fly as we are. So to me, like, that's the ultimate rebellion. You don't have to.
They didn't want us to smoke reefer.
Right?
I would say that would be
and be up in their space, that should, it's all of that.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all inherently political at the end of the day, for sure.
Absolutely. So when I know that there are DJs out there right now who claim that they are not political or they don't like that there's like politics in music and things like that. I'm like, I don't know, you are purposely deluding yourself.
Correct.
Because if you are listening to anything that you play or anything that you like, that shit is political. The person who wrote that experienced shit within their life that in which they're expressing that music that makes it political as fuck.
Right.
Totally. Cosmo,
And also,
looked like you wanted to say something.
Like, you know, joy. There's a saying, joy is an act of resistance, right? You know, and you know the amalgamation of the entire canon of music that by and large, what DJs play comes from that root of resistance. Comes from that root, you know. So like, you're fooling yourself if you say that there's not that stuff there, you know. I think that Tara put it absolutely perfectly. And when you said, you know, for a DJ that said, I don't like the politics, in my mind, it was just the emoji eyes, right? I'm seeing you.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, also understand, like we were talking about earlier, you know, especially what's written into the DNA of DJing, you know, so much of it was an act of defiance and an act of resistance, because you're coming from, you know, this huge. You're coming from this, you know, this huge overtly act of oppression, you know, and you know, in the gay clubs in the late 60s, early 70s, you know, create communities and create safe spaces and create
Absolutely.
their world, you know, I'm saying from what was happening in the Bronx in the early 70s, you know, you had a city that had just been laid to waste from neglect and contempt, and they flipped it and they remixed it and they created something which ended up changing the world.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I to answer the question, you know, like, you don't necessarily have to kind of be over the top, like you said about playing PE or the Coup or, you know, Paris or Sister Souljah. I mean, I'll play that. I will.
Too, but
you know what I'm saying?
don't have to be
For
like
righteous teachers.
For righteous teachers. Represent, you know what I'm saying?
X-Clan.
But also remember, I mean, you know, part of it is just like, you know, we can't lose touch of the things which, you know, bring us happiness and bring us joy, and, you know, us being like the collective us, you know.
Well, and you know, I want to give BONICS some space to talk about this too, because he's playing music every day on the radio. But you know, I think I might have mentioned to you guys before, but some of you anyway, that's as DJs, that's what draws us in, is all just what you said, Cosmo. It's the dynamic of so many different kinds of emotion, and being able to tap into that emotion. And I was telling these guys when I was down at the protest, you know, being in DC, Kim, you know, I don't know if you came to DC originally for a job that I think you came here for a job that was very, you know, a job of a strong belief. But growing up in DC, we see protests every day. Like, the protest is, you know, it gets to a point where you're like, man, I want to protest the protesters, because there's a protest about everything in DC every day of the week.
Stop 16th Street again.
Always. And so this, for us, a lot of us, this is kind of like normal life living in DC. There's always somebody on Capitol Hill. You're seeing all these things go. You're seeing right, left, center, alien, all these crazy topics. And with the protest, what was incredible to me, what you were saying about the music, and you could feel that emotion in the protesters. It would go from a moment of unity and people saying, like, you know, the chants and the call outs were more about how incredible everybody was feeling to see all these walks of life together. And then that would taper off and it would go to hands up, don't shoot. And you would see anger start to pull and rise up. And then you would see like a drowning of emotion of people just feeling just like their hearts being ripped out. And you're watching this kind of ebb and flows of these emotions all within like a 2-hour set of, and it's almost like a DJ set, you know, in that sense of like, so you might play a PE song for a minute, and then you might play a Tina Marie record for a minute, you know, or something that when you're really in your head and in your moment, you want to tap into a lot of different emotion. That's what pulls up together. So BONICS, you know, like tell us about your experience. You were saying earlier, you know, that you're having a hard time, not necessarily maybe a hard time, but you know, you're very cognizant of what's happening right now and how you play that role.
You know, I'm still playing hit music, right? So that's what we do. Plus, but with definitely a live and local attitude with live and, you know, with local music too. And we have local music shows but it's not 100% local music. But, you know, the power of the music, you say the right words and then you play the right song and you really make people feel. And that's what music is, right? And so when you are able to choose those songs and choose those moments, especially during, when the riots were happening and it was watching the video and then watching it explode and knowing it was right down the street, that Cup Foods, like I used to order a lot of food from, you know? So when it's right there, it's pretty surreal, but, you know, bringing it back to the music, just having a voice on the radio. And I know being able to talk about, to share the other voices and to be able to talk about it and say Black Lives Matter on the radio and not feel like I'm going to offend my boss or whatever. And we're talking about what I like about radio, what I was saying earlier, that I mean, it's available, right? So everyone has their own platform, but radio is something that's as available as TV. Anyone with a basic radio can get it. So the message has to be a little bit wider because, like I said before, we have all types of listeners. So that does make it difficult, but be able to use hip hop and to use certain songs to really create a feeling. I did a mix that aired 24 hours a day when we did the Blackout Tuesday, whether we think it was a good idea or not. My boss was like, hey, just make an hour mix and we'll just play it over and over and over again. And to me, the right songs weren't the Kendrick Lamar, All Right. It was the Bob Marley, One Love. You know what I mean? It was Desiree, you know, I want to be bad, I want to be bold, I want to be wiser. It wasn't something that would make people more angry because
feel good joints.
Yeah, feel good joints. And I put in the words one time when I was on the radio that different times of the night when we DJ require different records, right? When we want the crowd to amp up, when we want them to slow down, when we want to, you know, maybe they're tired of hearing the same record and they got to hear something else. And I think that's kind of the power as a DJ as we have, you know, whether you want to make that like an analogy too about vocally too, what we can do, but different situations and people require different records. And we can't expect everyone to respond in the same way or be angry at the same degree and expect them to respond the same way because some people have to still be a dad or they still have a family or they have to feed themselves. So I think it's just so many varying degrees of this. And, you know, with the radio especially, I'm so thankful that I can play music in joints that, you know, whether it's local music and sprinkled through the hits and just be able to speak every day at 10 o'clock. I do this thing called Blessings and I just kind of say how I feel. And it's, you know, it's not like me trying to get churchy at all because it's just to talk about how I feel. I think it's important that I talk. Often I remind the audience that I'm not perfect because we have, I think that when we just show this perfect side of us and we talk on the radio and like, hey, nothing's wrong, but here's hip music. Hey, you know, I get on the radio and I say, hey, I make mistakes. And so I'm saying this now. So when I do make one, we can rewind this tape because it's hard. Like you said, we got to take action in places that there's a perfect opportunity to speak on things that we couldn't before. Also at the same time, different situations require different songs. So it's been interesting and also very taxing because I think have, you know, big empath vibes and, you know, seeing people I respect too being like, and I'm like, yo, you probably have it way easy for, you know, you have your resources are way better than someone that just needs to feed a family, you know? And so it's just, I feel like, man, that's why I meant when it's hard that to be business as usual, knowing that there's people hurting and even people in different, even people I agree with, but how they're saying it. It's like bringing a great DJ to be a guest DJ in your night, and they're just not hitting it because it's not very crowd. You know, you're just like, but it's different. And some people will be like, oh, I love it. Some people are like, well, when are you getting back on? And that's your homie that you respect. You know those vibes. So that's what makes it real difficult. But being able to speak, what I'm trying to do is add a little bit, I don't want to say positivity, just a little bit of humanity on this platform. Most people think of hip hop, especially when it's available. Again, I have to say that because not everyone is on the radio, not everyone's on TV. Everyone can have a podcast or whatever, but these are available. So I feel real special to be able to have that and push a message that brings hip hop into humanity as well. We got to wait till someone dies before we have to get real on the radio. No, let's get real on the radio as much as we can, push the boundaries with all respect, because people turn on music to get away from the politics.
Totally. And you're doing that a lot, BONICS, also bringing in like the community on the radio, having them speak, which is awesome. I wanted to ask a question from Maria Chinchilla. She says, hey, y'all, thanks for having this discussion. I'm not a DJ, but I'm researching how Black, Indigenous, people of color owned or managed night spaces actually catalyzes civic participation to create change. Would you consider this to be true? Do you think Black, Indigenous, people of color were not systematically shut out from owning and managing actual spaces like nightclubs? That this situation would be different?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I'm going to say, at least in New York, yes. Funny enough, I was actually like which never happens, but I got asked to speak to some independent venue owners earlier today, and myself is along with Rich Medina, who was
Hey,
shout out to Rich Medina.
Papa let people know it was amazing. So and then I realized, like, you know, and it's funny, like somebody had just posted up, like, oh, you know, I'm on Twitter, like, oh, you know, I just, you know, let's have like a, you know, favorite Black-owned venue space thing, because I'm trying to find some, and you know, people were thinking about New York, specifically nightlife. I'm thinking bars and lounges. So, you know, there's a lot of not a lot, but there are restaurants, you know, other things. But when I'm thinking about lounges and bars, particularly in Brooklyn, I can think of two, two Black-owned. A few that are POC owned, Latino owned. So, and the ones that I do know that are, they've been the most vocal, or have been among the most vocal. One is Come On Everybody, which is not too far from me, owned by two Latino queer men, and they are, that's where I get my protest information. You know, they have all different types of events. They put, you know, the owner put me on when he had another venue when nobody wanted to book me to do shit. So I like love them forever, but also like that's where I keep aware. And I think back in the day, and even to a degree, back in the day, even when it wasn't legal, when you had more nightlife spaces in New York available because it was just cheap and people could run those types of things, and even if it wasn't perfectly legal, those were spaces, like Cosmo said, for people to get together that was safe, where people can convene to get together, talk, also share information. And it's just, I don't think it's the same now. I think now we're kind of even as people who want to put on events for our types of crowds face that challenge, assuming our types of crowds are pretty diverse generally, because I think we for the most part, all of us spin some sort of Black music, so we do, and we all want to bring in a diverse crowd.
Absolutely.
So it can be a difficult situation going to what is to be a white establishment, and try to say, and try to basically use their space for your event. I think I've never had an issue when it's been a space that's owned by a person of color. I mean, I just never have. Mainly because I know, like, my crowd, they drink a lot. So it's like, we're gonna bring you some money. I have, events under my belt and I've demonstrated that I can put on very well attended events. But I've never had to really plead a case. I had the another one that I love, Ode to Babel, I hit them up and was like, look, I just want to, can I play some trip hop? I want to do a Portishead tribute. Like, and they're like, sure, yeah, you know, it's like whatever, it's cool because it's like they consider themselves to be like a community space. So you know, they let me do that. I feel like I've never really, even if I've had good relationships with white-owned venues, generally there's just not that situation. It's a matter of like money. It's a matter of like, oh, well, prove your case, or you do, and which I don't have a problem doing. I'm very professional. We have marketing decks. We have all of these things, but it's not, you know, for nightlife, when you're thinking about it being like a way to share, a way to build, a way of having community, you are in a neighborhood that comprises of certain people that you should want to attract. You shouldn't be expecting people to be coming from other neighborhoods to come. But I think a lot of those spaces do, because a lot of them are in areas that are gentrifying. You know, so it's like, okay, they want people to come, but they don't necessarily want the dude down the street to come. Or that, you know, they'll tolerate those people, but generally they want to bring their friends. They want to bring the new people who moved into the neighborhood. They don't want the old heads, which is stupid because they drink too. I do think that definitely like seeing a reduction, because you know, when I first started going out partying in New York City, there were way more Black-owned venues, way more, and it was just a lot. Like you could go from spot to spot. DeKalb Avenue in Fort Greene was like legit a strip. Like we used to just, and they were not clubs, they were just lounges with really good DJs. So we had Madiba, which was like South African spot, which closed a few years ago, which was like very tragic. Across the street, there was another one called Buttercup. People like Paula Smith worked there, Tiambe worked there. Like my friend's this really famous artist, she worked there. Like it's, you know, you think about, that's like when Nelson George talks about Brooklyn Bohème, that's that neighborhood, that's that area. There was a place, Soul, and DJs, like we used to just go walk down the street and go from spot to spot to spot. And that doesn't exist in New York anymore. Everything is very much like, you know, APT. Even if that wasn't I had no idea what music, who was there, you know, except for, I would know Wednesday nights was Rich Medina, but any other night I'd roll up in there, didn't know what was it, but you know, I was like, I'm gonna have a good time. I don't know what the fucking music is, but I know it's going to be diverse, and I know it's going to be a good time, because they had diverse staff, they had diverse DJs, they just, they got it. And they were about cultivating a culture and a community. Even if I have no idea, I've never met the owners, maybe they were just about the dollar, but they managed to do it in a way that, you know, made you feel like they were really more about the music and the culture, which to me that's how I felt. And we don't have those types of spaces anymore. And places, people that do try to cultivate them in New York, it's difficult because they have a bottom line. Rent's fucking high.
Yep. Same here in Chicago too. I mean, for me personally, prior to, you know, quarantine, like the two bars that I mainly DJ'd at were managed by Black person and someone who's Latinx. So, and to be real with you, like I felt more inclined to DJ how I wanted to at these spots, because they were just, you know, as open, and they were more welcoming. And that's not to say that there's like white owners out there that, you know, don't do that either. But ultimately, for my personal experience, majority of the spots that I feel generally comfortable at are owned by people of color.
Well, and what I think what that usually translates to is you're going to find more people of color that are actually passionate about doing it, as opposed to a lot of white owners are doing it because it's a cool thing, or they've got investors and like, I'm a banker by day and hey, I own a nightclub at night. Ha, I take my girls there. That's the mentality of a lot of
place
places.
to park your investments.
Yeah, like, oh look, I'm gonna bring all my guys from business school here, and we're gonna party it up, and it's a club that I own, and it's a haha, you know. And where, you know, Tara, what you were saying earlier, and Cosmo, you were talking about as well, is like, you know, for me, when I did my first parties when I was 19, 20 years old and trying to convince a club owner to give me a spot, it was always going to the gay clubs. It was always going, they were always the most open. You said the same thing. I think what's, you know, we've all been, I think, and a lot of us have been caught up in, you know, we're all DJs and in the DJ culture. So we're seeing it through the lens, this whole movement, a lot of it through the lens of a lot of our peers and a lot of the people that we communicate with. And I think it's somewhat been lost in this movement to a degree, and not understanding of how much contribution this movement has given to dance music to DJing. I mean, people don't really realize that before the gay culture came about in New York City, across all of America, you could not be on a dance floor unless you were a man and a woman like this. And it was everywhere. You would go into any what they would call a cabaret or nightclub, and you could not step foot on a dance floor unless you had a partner that was of the opposite sex. And it was gay men and gay women that said no more of that. Mel Sharon was talking about it in his documentary, and just that in itself, when we all say like, oh man, you know, you can't play this music because if you don't understand it, you can't be a racist and play the music that you're a vulture from that. But also the gay culture has given so much of what we love and do to us, and I think we're finally starting to see that come to light, and it's very, I think, exciting to feel that it's not just, you know, one sector of racism or bigotry that we're trying to tackle right now. It's all of it. You're either in or you're out, and it's all or nothing. And you know, I love to hear, you know, you guys like Cosmo. You've got so much knowledge on just the history and the culture of music, and you know, spreading that to people is important, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much of what
can you break
love.
it down? Sorry to cut you off, Chris. Cosmo, you said it so well before we started the live recording and did the broadcast, the generational points in which music was the guiding factor for social change, especially within the queer community. Can you run through that real quick for some of our listeners or younger DJs who might not know?
But also, like, you can kind of take a step back and kind of look at the struggle, right? You know, it's like this big amalgamation of the struggle, right? Struggle going back generations and generations and generations, centuries, you know, it always had music as a company, you know, and there was always art and creation, which ran concurrent with struggle, right? And if you go back to, you know, we're talking about in the early 20th century, what we were talking about earlier in this conversation of joy being an act of resistance. You know, look at, you know, what happened with the Harlem Renaissance, you know, and, you know, economic empowerment for Black folk in the United States coming off the tail end of Reconstruction, right? You know, lest we talk about the Greenwood. Go throughout the 50s and the 60s with protest music, folk music, politically charged soul music, into rock and roll, into funk and all that stuff. And when you know, all it, so they all, it's all kind of, it's all intertwined. But specifically talking about in the gay community, in the queer community, right? Like, so you were talking about, they had these cabaret laws where, you know, a man couldn't dance with another man, couldn't even be on the same dance floor, right? You know, and that's the story of Stonewall. You know, the NYPD came in 1969 to raid a cabaret, raid a bar, and the folks decided they didn't want to take it anymore. They didn't want to be under the thumb of an oppressive system and people. So, you know, I mean, I think that, you know, and then I was also talking about with the loft, you know, I mean, obviously that's, you know, a whole different thing that kind of created you know, its own community. But, you know, I mean, the thing about it is at the end of the day, you know, the artistic community has always kind of run alongside the activist community and people who have been pushing for change. So that's why it's really important for us as artists and as creatives to kind of understand that we also do play a role in this. You know, the idea of being able to use your position to either shed a light or to speak up or speak loud or to try to create some sort of change or enact some sort of change, that we all have a responsibility. You know? Especially people who are not Black folk operating within a space,
yeah,
which is a Black space, you know, because you're a visitor here.
Yeah.
You know, so you be cherry picking in that regard. And I understand, like the talking about BONICS. I mean, like, you had a really good point. Like, terrestrial radio is a really important thing. Terrestrial radio is universally accessible, right? And you are in a powerful position, but I also do understand, I hear in your voice and I hear in your words when you talk to me and you talk to us and you say, it's difficult for me. Because, as you said, how are you going to figure out the balance of, okay, I want to make sure that I get my message out loud and clear,
right?
Make it actually the proper message, but then you got to take care of your kids and feed your family, right? So I get it, I think that there's many different roles for everyone, and those roles can change over time.
Exactly.
Right. But it's a really important thing to understand that this is something which goes back 450, 500 years,
Well, just in this country. But
just in this country.
Yeah.
Also, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say, since we were talking about like history, I know that I think most of us would probably agree there are not that many books that kind of just talk about like nightlife, DJing, but I have this book.
That book is sitting on my nightstand right now. I love that book.
I know. Honestly, if you are a DJ or you want to be, or you just love nightlife culture, last night a DJ saved my life, The History of a Disc Jockey. One of my favorite books. I think I read this before I really started DJing, but you really get a lot of understanding and context. And this goes back to, and it's not just specific to any one region. They go all over the world and talk about Northern Soul in the UK. They talk about like the origins of DJing, from when people just dropped a needle on a record, no mixer, no anything. I love this book. And then also I haven't finished it, but this is a book about basically like 5 years in the 1970s called Love Goes to Buildings on Fire. It's just like a very tight period of New York, and they just talk about all the different kinds of scenes and spaces that kind of came up in New York, from like rock and punk to hip hop, and like or the beginnings of hip hop rather, and like how that really impacted and how that came up in a time when New York, I mean, I wasn't alive. I'm not that old, but I wasn't alive, and how, just how like really tumultuous New York was. New York was on the verge of bankruptcy, all of these things. It sounds rather exciting, but I'm sure it was like, my parents immigrated here in the 70s. I don't think it was fun for them, like on top of it all. But a lot of great things obviously come from, unfortunately, struggle and dire situations. So, there's context. And I do think a lot of people, without understanding that, especially people who if you don't live in a major city, if you don't come from a space that to be able to understand why this music is the way it is, it's really important for you to educate yourself.
Absolutely.
Books will help. There's nothing wrong with reading a book. And these are great books. Like, they're not.
That is a really
Thank
good
you
one.
so much for sharing those, Tara.
They're not boring books.
Speaking of books, I saw on the news maybe yesterday that pro-slave books that were written, all of them that have been written and been published that were out have been flying off the shelves, not in stock. I guess people are buying these things. What do you guys think about that? Just in a general.
Real quick, along that line, there's this prominent idea of the How to Make a Slave by Willie Lynch as like the blueprint that was to create like the structure of how to dehumanize a person and make them a servant. And just over the course of my life, that was a thing that was quoted all the time. Apparently, Willie Lynch, or there's some level of disproving that was a thing that actually took place. However, learning that the story behind Willie Lynch in the book, one or the other, is not a real thing that existed. There is a void there that's being filled by people who want that to be a thing. So I don't know about, I guess, any of these books that are being bought now, but I'm very interested to hear another perspective from outside of my understanding of it.
I mean, I don't know why those books are. I'm sure it's probably to counter a lot of the anti-racist books that have been selling over the past few weeks. A lot, like if you look at the New York Times bestseller list, there are a lot of books written by, if not Black writers, by writers who have specifically written about like anti-racism. So I'm sure that's just a response to it. I don't think, maybe people are, honestly, I don't know if on either side, if people are reading them. I hope the ones who buy the anti-racism books are reading them. But I do think it's more of like a demonstration. Just like when people, the guys burned up their Nikes, like, why would you destroy your own property? Fine. Yeah. Dumb. Like, I think it's just that. And I also do think, honestly, I mean, it's to me at this point, again, in my 41 years of life, it's a sickness. It's a sickness. I can't figure out any other way. I do, you spend a lot of time trying to understand why people act the way they do. I do think it's a sickness. I think racism and capitalism and systematic oppression does things to our mental capabilities. For others, so for some it manifests in addiction, depression, things of that sort. But I think for others, especially those who feel a sense or a lack of identity, a lack of belonging, who want to belong to something, even if it's something detrimental like white supremacy, it manifests in that way too. So, I think we find it to be very surprising, but I'm not surprised because I do think that the way that this country is set up is failed people in so many different ways. You would like to think that we'd all fall to the idea of revolting and just trying to, remove these systems, but people really default to wanting to hold on to them because they feel they just haven't had the opportunity to prosper from it yet.
And there's a familiarity there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the system is designed to have us, it's the carrot and stick. The system is designed to have us keep on going for that carrot. Knowing that we'll never get that. But you're absolutely right, about it being a sickness, and it's a sickness that perpetuates itself as well.
Yeah. We have one more. Oh, sorry, Cosmo.
Real quick, Cosmo, you had a book you held up in your hand. Do we have a third book recommendation for the audience?
Yes, please.
Both those books that Tara brought up are great, and then I wanted to bring this, which is Love Saves the Day, which is a history of American dance music culture, 1970 to 1979.
Nice.
By Tim Lawrence. This is one of those books that I probably owned a dozen copies, and whenever I mention it to a friend of mine, oh, you haven't read it? I just give them my copy. Right?
Yeah. That's what happened to this one. I had to. I was like, I stopped.
So it also talks about nightlife culture across the spectrum in New York from 70 to 79, but it puts it in context with the socioeconomic scenario of what the city was like leading up to it, decades leading up to it, and what New York was in the 70s. Also, can you guys hear me okay? Because I saw in the chat that I was a little low.
Yeah, you're a little low.
You're a little lower.
I think there's
but
the
I can
auto
hear you.
gain that's happening inside of Zoom, so that's not your fault. If you check the audio settings, I can show you how to do it in the chat real quick, but we can keep it moving with the next question.
All right, cool. I'll
Awesome.
project as well.
Yes,
right?
project.
We have Last
Say it
Night
with your
in
chest.
My Life with the song and Love Saves the Day, a history of American dance music. Two good book recommendations for everyone that's listening and couldn't actually see the books. We have one more question from the chat from Thomas Jasmine. How do you handle silence from those in your DJ network, whether it be from the establishments that you work with or the DJs you call friends? She says, he says, while I try to fight back and inform those within our community, there are many popular local DJs who remain silent or blatantly post against BLM, lacking compassion, knowledge, and a sense of history. Sanjay, you're actually talking about this earlier as well a little bit.
Yeah, man, that's there's a lot in there. I think before I dive in with a fully transparent answer,
Before you dive in,
go for
thank
it.
you once again to our associate producer Adrian. We'll catch you at the end of the show.
And thank you everybody for asking us questions.
Simple answer: if you don't know the secret handshake, then I ain't fucking with you.
Guys, real quick, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Cool.
Did it to it. All right. So as far as this perspective, I've I wanted to make sure there was plenty of space for everybody to speak on this before I got into my own stuff. And this kind of it leads into what we were talking about before, the previous question about as an artist, where's the line between being creative and really trying to do something with the platform that we have as a DJ to say a message that's going to bring people together overall. I've been DJing for 13 years now, and there was definitely a point when I started getting into the club space where it was very obvious to me because of the time period that there's that separation in the crowd. There was like less and less people that looked like me, less and less black DJs of my age group that were able to survive in the club world. I live in Baltimore City, and it was coming up and back between Baltimore and DC. And then more and more, I would get those questions of like, hey, can you avoid playing hip hop? Hey, can you cater to the table service crowd? Hey, can you do this and that? There are these little things where I would realize over the time, like they're saying this to me because I'm black, because my friends that I have these conversations with locally and work at the same places are not getting the same questions from the owners, from the bar staff, the management, whatever. So I took a long, long time to figure out how I wanted to approach that. It's important to me to make sure that I use my voice where it's necessary and where it has an impact. However, we've spent the last 13 years that I've been a DJ being told, you play the music, someone else's job is to be the politician. So I had a very fine line in the sand. And creatively, it was kind of stifling. So I stopped over time taking gigs at high-paying places specifically because I realized if I'm financially reliant on this structure of nightlife, of bottle service, then I have to do whatever it is that they say. And as a result of that, my social circle started to change. And it's still changing to this day. But to get to the current question about those people that stay silent, right now, I'm at this point in my career where there's a very fine line, like I said before, in the sand. There's people who don't want to lose their opportunities because they're still completely consumed by this world where if you say the wrong thing, you lose the gig, and then there goes that $400, $500, whatever dollars that you would have made on Saturday night, and you don't have another spot to get that money from, so you stay silent. The more you diversify your income as a DJ or just a business owner in general, the less you have to worry about one little thing, one little needle toppling the entire tower down. So I try to lean on the places that represent something that is community building, that is positive in the lights of marginalized communities. There's a place here in Baltimore called The Crown, which is like the grimy place where there's asbestos in the walls, but it's a sweatbox and everybody loves it. And they have like the best queer night anywhere you're gonna find in this region. It's man. So it's one of those places where like the people who are the most marginalized get drawn to that. I want to play at the places like that because they don't have the big budgets, but they're open and accepting and inclusive of everyone. So the people that are staying silent because they want to get the big check and they don't want to lose the big check, they stay on the other side and I stay on my side. However, there are moments, just like being on this podcast, we're week number 10 of this, that me taking that position and saying like, all right, I'm just going to talk when it's important. No, I'm very much trying to talk now that there's people that look up to me, and I'm nobody in the grand scheme of our industry. There's people that look up to me, and they're looking to me to say something. So it's becoming more and more important to say, hey, as a black man that's in the nightlife industry, there's a lot of fucked up stuff. Sorry, Mom and Dad, I know you're listening. That's happening and will continue to happen. So for me to be complicit to that is not okay anymore. Also, as an artist, as an entertainer, our job is to entertain people and bring them together. That gives an opportunity for this dialogue. So it has to be done in a way that's allowing some of that inclusive space, the same way you'd have at like the good music spot, the weird dive bar with the sweat on the walls. But you also have to diversify your income and to be able to have that kind of flexibility. I lean on private events more than I lean on clubs. I just started basically a Patreon page on my website so I can have more streams of income coming in and not have to worry about when are the clubs going to open back up. I don't want to have to rely on the people who are holding my people back because that is a thing that I would need to do to keep the rent paid.
Amen to that, Sean. For real. That's honestly the realest thing, if not the most sobering thing you should say to DJs currently, because I mean a lot of them are struggling with just trying to figure out how to make money like streaming, and even the DMCA is like starting to like take down those streams as well. So it's just like, where do we go from here? But yeah, I mean, to your point though, I mean, yeah, like you want to, you want to diversify. You want to just find more inclusion in whatever you do, because ultimately, if you surround yourself with these, these clubs that are perpetuating the BS, it's just like you're kind of perpetuating it too.
Yes.
So, honestly, to those who are not like, to you, anybody's like DJ, like any of your friends who are DJing currently, or like who are like tied to these spots, like you should just have an honest conversation with them and just see where they stand on it. You shouldn't attack them, because ultimately at the end of the day, you're right. Like there was a fine line between politics and DJing, but now, I mean, to Tara's point, like everything is inherently political, no matter where you stand on it. So you want to just approach any DJ that you're friends with just with love, and just see like, yo, where do you stand on this? Like, are you not going to say anything? I mean, I know you want to maintain this check, but they're on some BS. Like, I mean, like now, I mean, because at the end of the day, I mean, if enough word gets out about these spots, like that's gonna affect that club's wallet, and which in turn is gonna affect the DJ's wallet, because they're not getting paid too. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm personally pushing for, is like that kind of reform. Like if these clubs don't, change up, like then these people are gonna change out. Basically, they're gonna get out of their spots. They're not gonna mess with them knowing that you're on some BS like that. So.
Well, and just like you said, guilty by association. Even if you're like, well, I don't really believe that way, but you're taking the money from a place like that, it's a very short-sighted way to handle your long-term career if you're trying to do this for a long time. Is, you could say, well, this spot pays you really good, I'm gonna stay there, and get yourself alienated throughout your city. Because if they go down, you're going down with them. Just like Eddie Murphy said, if I go down, you go down, Dick Dog.
You're going down too.
I think it's okay to just make new friends too. Like, I think if your friends are going to be silent on this issue, they're essentially saying that, I mean, I don't know how to say this nicely, but they're essentially saying that they're not like seeing the validity of your life. And I think it's okay to just
Alchemist, they stand with the oppressor.
You know what I mean? Like,
Facts.
I think it's good to speak up, and I think it's good to do you, and I think you got to go play the parties that are you. And I think Artist said something earlier about like, you get tired of selling your soul. Like, you have to do what's right for you. And if that means you have to leave some people behind, I think that's okay. Like, you're not going to be able to save everybody. And if some people, want to stay mute, or they want to like actively speak out against Black Lives Matter, which makes zero sense to me, like, you do what you do to try to show them the light, but there's only so much you can do, right? And then sometimes you just got to cut these people off, and like, they're going to be on the wrong side of history when this is all over.
They got to do the work for themselves. Yeah,
absolutely.
And there's like a billion, trillion, billion resources out there for them to do the work for themselves. And like, if everybody like lives on Instagram, and if you haven't found a reading list by now, like, you're fucking asleep. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like,
also, like, I'm listening to what you're playing though too, because a lot of this music, it's like people are you think that it's like made up. You think people are making stories like when they sing about what they sing. You think when hip hop was originated, they were talking about you thought was the message a fake song, like he just made it up in his head, this whole like street, this street drama.
Some people
this is
do.
what motherfuckers saw on the street.
Must have been high.
In their but this is it's like people really think that it's made up. It is not made up. And I do think that a lot of people in this world, a lot of white people in America have deluded themselves, and they don't believe that this type of America exists because they don't see it. But that's exactly the point. And to be like listening to this music, and you think you're being such a badass, and you think you're being like very like, oh, this is like ooh, like this is this is some dirt, like bad, these are bad things that I'm doing by listening to this music. It's ridiculous to me, because this is what people are actually living.
They're
like,
gaslighting themselves.
They are.
Yeah.
Technology has been always prevalent, Technology is how
this
they use
is
it.
like, well, this is something that, well, it's because of them, they brought it on themselves. But again, they don't know the history of the country in which they live, because they're not taught that in schools. A lot of the things that we, and that kind of that is what a lot. People kind of talk about how, like school me. I don't know, school me. I'm like, well, I had to school myself. I had to learn because I had to figure my, like, how am I going to move in this world? Because I am a Black woman, clearly. Ain't nobody out here trying to help me. I need to learn about how this all came to be so I can understand how to dismantle this. And if you're not in that position where you have to do that, you're not going to do it. But now I think people, so I think that's why people feel like they need to be spoon-fed the knowledge. It's like, no, I did not come out of my mom fucking knowing lift every voice and sing. I didn't also like I'm not while I am a Black woman in this country, I was raised by immigrants, so they also had to learn. They came from Haiti. We didn't, another very, original revolutionaries.
The revolutionary country.
The original revolution.
I love Haiti.
Who actually did, again, fun fact since we're here, who helped the Battle of Savannah. Haitian slaves fought for American independence. And people don't know that. So I don't, it's again, these are not things I did not come out of my mom knowing that. Did not even know that as a teenager. I learned that in 2007 when Savannah, Georgia unveiled a monument to honor those slaves who fought for American independence. So it's I think people don't feel like they have to learn, and don't have to be aware because they like their little bubble, they like the world in which they live, and when they see that crumbling, again, some people are down like, oh shit, like maybe I need to wake up, and other people are, they want to further retreat within themselves, and they have to realize that that's not the case. And again, if the music that you're playing is speaking to you and is there to educate you to understand, rappers. I learned about COINTELPRO from music I listened to. I learned about the Black Panthers I learned from Paris, listening to Paris. What's this? I don't, again, growing up, I'm a child, and also like that's not something, my parents came to this country around this time, but they weren't necessarily aware of that either because they were dealing with their own challenges coming in as foreigners. So this isn't anything that any of us that didn't have to go through and didn't have to learn for ourselves. But I think some of us just had to out of survival. And, it's coming more apparent that all of us are going to have to learn that out of survival because this is eventually going to impact all of us. And I think those people who are remaining silent, you can have your opinion on things. I don't necessarily agree. I don't think we're all going to be on the right side of history here, but you have to understand the history so you could really make a valid decision for yourself. If you want to uphold white supremacy, you've read all the texts, whatever. Okay, I don't know if that's what you came to, great. But a lot of people are just incredibly ignorant and only rely on one source for their news. I don't do that. And then also there are books, which get
libraries are still a thing.
Thoroughly checked. Libraries are free. A lot of books online. A lot of books you can download. Not that you should do that. You should make sure writers get paid, but I'm saying if you don't have money, but also libraries are free and you can get a Kindle for like books for free that you could put on your laptop or your device. So there's not really an excuse at this point. You can start with anything. And again, like somebody said, like on social media, people are distributing lists left and right. One book, start with one thing. You'll learn.
I think that it's a good thing that a lot of people are feeling uncomfortable right now.
Yes.
Because that uncomfortable place is a place where they're going to be able to grow, right? Now, like, I agree and disagree with some of what Tara was saying in the sense of like, okay, like, yeah, you're choosing white supremacy, yeah, okay, cool, it reminds me of the Baldwin quote, like you're allowed to have your opinion. Everybody's allowed. I'm going to paraphrase it, like I'm going to mangle it, right? But paraphrasing James Baldwin, you have your right to your opinion, unless your opinion
is different than mine or something like that.
Like view of my humanity or something.
Yeah.
Like
unless your opinion is
the devil
against my basic human rights or existence. Thank you. I can't just come up with Baldwin out of my head.
I only got one Baldwin quote off top, so yeah.
So so the point as to like kind of the original question is just like, how do you deal with the silence of people? It's difficult because personally, at least within like my close network, like I know that everybody that I kind of roll with, everybody is pretty much on volume 10, same way that I am, you know. And I've been this way for, I guess, my entire fucking life. You know, it just may be a little bit exacerbated at this point right now. But I also think that a lot of people are kind of like me. I don't know what they're afraid of compromising their brand, you know, or like whatever the impetus of why they don't want to actually be vocal, you know. And I'm like, fuck your brand, you know.
I found more irony in the ones that feel like they have to give a 3-page dissertation of how they think about all this stuff. It's like, I'm gonna say that I'm for Black Lives Matter, but I don't want to piss off any of the white people too that I'm working for, that I'm making too much of a political stance. So they go through this incredibly long explanation of their life when it's just pretty simple. You can just state it right here. You know, it takes like one
people in the back.
Yeah, man, for real, it's wild.
It's wild.
It's wildly performative, is what it is. You know what I'm saying? And to me, that shit's transparent. You know.
Absolutely.
You know.
I think too when. Oh, sorry.
No, it's all good. Please go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think too, when people are new to a movement and they're just kind of beginning to learn, I guess, the truth about life, it's like they realize they've had like their whole life they've been wrong their entire life, so they have to make up for all this lost time. So sometimes you see people coming like in full blast, you know, like just, you know, constantly posting on Instagram or whatever, or like sending out videos, and they're like almost like overcompensating for the fact that they're like a little bit late to the party, you know?
Yeah, I feel it.
And it's, you know, I'm like, well, it's good that you're finally here, but like,
thanks for showing up.
Maybe channel that energy into something, you know, besides Instagram, you know, because then I'm kind of like, are you doing it just for the likes? Or are you doing it like because you actually care, because you actually
becoming fashionable now?
Yeah, and it's like, I think it says a lot. Like, if you're willing to stand up when it's not trendy, I think that's more important and more valuable, honestly.
You know, and you know, we also in our society, we're ingrained in all these great American cliches, like can't teach an old dog new tricks, you know, which actually is from like the 1500s, from European establishment in old plays, but it was basically the white male dominance over all society has just perpetuated into things like that, where it's like, you know, so people start to already ingrain in their head, well, you know, I guess because I'm old, I just can't change. This is the way I am. And you know, I think what's beautiful about most of us as DJs is we're constantly trying to grow in our craft. We're constantly trying to get better at our art. We're constantly trying to learn and study new music or find new skills and techniques. And you can apply that to your life in the same way. It's, you know, it's some, you know, pride is a very tricky slope, because we look at things, we say pride, we say gay pride, or we say, if in sports, our team pride, or if there's a, you know, some crazy thing that happens in a city, we're like Boston proud or whatever. But pride is also the greatest leader to deception and to our downfalls as individuals. Collectively, pride is beautiful, but in an individuality, pride will destroy it. Pride makes somebody not want to change their opinion. Pride makes somebody say, well, I've gone this far down the rabbit hole with the president that I'm too proud to move over and let people know that actually, you know what, maybe I was wrong. Like, pride will keep you from admitting your faults, or being vulnerable, or expressing humility, which, you know, those are the things that we need to all be focused on right now. Is our, like BONICS said, we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us have lived perfect lives. None of us will live perfect lives. If you only want to surround yourself with perfection, you're going to be alone.
Perfection doesn't exist.
I don't know. I just love the colors of the Confederate flag.
Ad-Rock said a really dope quote.
I don't know. Keep it around.
And the times change, so the things that we thought were right when we were younger are wrong.
Absolutely.
Like, right. Of like when you go back and watch a TV show from the 80s or 90s, you're like, oh shit. Like,
They got it wrong.
yeah.
Ad Rock in the Beastie Boys documentary said.
You must say by the bell, like Zach is a like low key like. There was an episode with like subliminal messages. He could try to trick Kelly to like have sex with him. I'm like, you are a rapist a little bit. Like this is rapist. It's like, cool.
Zach Morris is trash.
I call him a, you know, but they had that whole Zach Morris is problematic guy. Like dissects. You ever seen that show?
Yeah, Zach Morris is trash on Death on Your Die. It's great.
Like that's what it is. It's funny, but you know, when you're a little kid watching it, you don't know that, and there's nothing.
Right.
You know, I don't fault myself or fault even like the show or how it was written. It's just that that's what we all thought at the time was all right. Like we didn't think that there was anything wrong with that. And then as times, you know, progress, you meet more people start to speak out more because a lot of times people, you know, I'm sure people back then thought it was wrong, but you know, nobody was listening. But also we were like little kids. So who's telling us as a little kid, like, no, this is bad. Like
Absolutely.
Advantage of this young girl. Like, I don't know. He's just it looks cute. Oh, he likes her, you know? It's, you know, we have to be able, like, as people, especially as we're getting older, to be open to new ideas and thoughts because we grew up in I grew up in a different time than now. You know, a 16-year-old now is going to school me on shit because I accepted things or I didn't know any better, and now they're growing up in a different world and they're able to tell us things. So I one of those things I fear is that I don't want to get so old that I don't keep myself open to learning more. And I think, as Stylus Chris said, like as a DJ, I feel like that's kind of what keeps me, or as a music lover too, keeps me kind of aware and wanting to be open because I do know that there's another world out there and the world's changing around me, and I want to keep up. It's important, but you know that none of us are perfect, and even if we were, again, the world moves fast, so you can't keep up.
Exactly. Yep. And to that point, my favorite quote from the Beastie Boys documentary, Ad Rock said something to the effect of, "I'd rather be a hypocrite than the same person forever."
Ooh, that's good.
Nice one.
So I mean, we're all gonna. I mean, as long as you're relatively open-minded, you're gonna learn new things. Yep. And you know, every time you look at your past, you know what you thought was right isn't probably wasn't right. So,
exactly.
I mean, you just have to be willing to let that go. So that's why I let go of those nightclubs. That's why I started trying to do what Cosmo does, like play at these more diverse spots, like just do more things that are like, where people are on the same wavelength overall. But that's not to say that I'd just rather grow than not, so simple as that.
Yeah, especially you have to craft, and again, as Sean Jay said, the more you diversify where you're getting your money from and building, the less beholden you are to having to adhere to things that just don't fit your philosophy. Certain venues, things like that. Again, I because I have a day job, I'm fortunate that I do have that ability. I know a lot of DJs don't. So I don't necessarily fault them. I understand, when I hear, I'm like, damn, you DJ in there, but it's well, damn, you got to make your money. So I'm not going to fault you. Cause I know,
absolutely.
It's, I think we've all done that. We've all had to kind of do that and, compromise, or you think you're going to do a certain type of thing. And then you walk in, you're like, oh, this is what I bargained for, but you're here, you're going to do it because of the,
those same effects.
You have to part of also crafting your career and you're developing yourself is really understanding yourself, and part of understanding yourself is understanding your values and understanding that it's really ultimately all you have, and you have to really be true to yourself in order to advance. It's all you have is your life. You don't have these clubs, you don't have this, the social media following, all of that is not forever, but you ultimately have what you feel in your heart, and you really have to follow that.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing just what you said, just in terms of the pandemic. Still, we still have a pandemic going on here, and people are, some people are, going back to work. Some DJs are choosing to go back